Hello, world. Hello, world. I'm wondering if you can hear me. It's normal that you don't see me. It should be just a black screen. I can see that there's people, and I'm just going to. I'm just going to guess that you can hear me. Is what I can do. Okay. Thank you, Nathan. I apologize to all of you that were hanging on every word yesterday and perhaps had some technical difficulties in hearing the ends of the stories. I'll be testing the YouTube out, and let's just see how we go. There is no visual because that's not the point. And yeah, that's all. So thank you for listening, world. I am standing on my balcony. I will dedicate this evening's readings to my dear friends in Saigon. And Nathan, you couldn't hear anything yesterday, but I did actually speak of you, and I was saying that the inspiration of the work, this thing, the readings, these evenings, this gathering, whatever, was your postcards. So I send you much love, and I hope that those in severe moments of lockdown may enjoy the following stories. As of yesterday, also, I wasn't sure if I could read for a full hour. I'm feeling slightly less in love with the world than I was yesterday after a day of screening, so I will go for as long as I can. I'm also a little bit nervous about today because I don't think I know these stories, but it's a challenge. Bear with me and enjoy the words. The first story of the evening is called The Fisherman and His Wife. There was once a fisherman who lived with his wife in a ditch close by the seaside. The fisherman used to go all day a-fishing, and one day, as he sat on the shore with his rod, looking at the shining water and watching his line, all of a sudden his float was dragged away deep under the sea. And in drawing it up, he pulled a great fish out of the water. The fish said to him, "Pray let me live. I am not a real fish. I am an enchanted prince. Put me in the water again and let me go." "Oh," said the man, "you need not make so many words about the matter. I wish to have nothing to do with a fish that can talk. So swim away as soon as you please." Then he put him back into the water, and the fish darted straight down to the bottom and left a long streak of blood behind him. When the fisherman went home to his wife in the ditch, he told her how he had caught a great fish and how it had told him it was an enchanted prince, and that on hearing it speak, he had let it go. "Did you not ask for anything?" said the wife. "No," said the man. "What should I ask for?" "Ah," said the wife, "we live very wretchedly here in this nasty, stinking ditch. Do go back and tell the fish we want a little cottage." The fisherman did not much like the business. However, he went to the sea, and when he came there, the water looked all yellow and green, and he stood at the water's edge and said, "O man of the sea, come listen to me, for Alice, my wife, the plague of my life, has sent me to beg a boon of thee." Then the fish came swimming to him and said, "Well, what does she want?" "Ah," said the fisherman, "my wife says that when I had caught you, I ought to have asked you for something before I let you go. She does not like living any longer in the ditch and wants a little cottage." "Go home then," said the fish. "She is in the cottage already." So the man went home and saw his wife standing at the door of a cottage. Come in," said she. "Is not this much better than the ditch?" And there was a parlour and a bedchamber and a kitchen, and behind the cottage there was a little garden with all sorts of flowers and fruits, and a courtyard full of ducks and chickens. "Ah," said the fisherman, "how happily we shall live here." "We will try to do so at least," said the wife. Everything went right for a week or two, and then Dame Alice said, "Husband, there is not room enough in this cottage. The courtyard and garden are a great deal too small. I shall like to have a large stone castle to live in. So go to the fish again and tell him to give us a castle." "Wife," said the fisherman, "I don't like to go to him again, for perhaps he will be angry. We ought to be content with the cottage." "Nonsense," said the wife. "He will do it very willingly. Go along and try." The fisherman went with his heart, but his heart was very heavy. And when he came to the sea, it looked blue and gloomy, though it was quite calm, and he went close to it and said, "O man of the sea, come listen to me, for Alice my wife, the plague of my life, hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." "What does she want now?" said the fish. "Ah," said the man very sorrowfully, "my wife wants to live in a stone castle." "Go on then," said the fish. "She is standing at the door of it already." So away went the fisherman and found his wife standing before a great castle. "See," said she, "is not this grand?" With that they went into the castle together and found a great many servants there, and the rooms all richly furnished and full of golden chairs and tables. And behind the castle was a garden and a wood 1/2 mile long, full of sheep and goats and hares and deer. And in the courtyard were stables and cowhouses. "Well," said the man, "now will we live contented and happy in this beautiful castle for the rest of our lives." "Perhaps we may," said the wife, "but let us consider and sleep on it before we make up our minds." So they went to bed. The next morning, when Dame Alice awoke, it was broad daylight, and she jogged the fisherman with her elbow and said, "Get up, husband, and bestir yourself, for we must be king of all the land." Wife," said the man, "why should we wish to be king? I will not be king." "Then I will," said Alice. "But wife," answered the fisherman, "how can you be king? The fish cannot make you a king." "Husband," said she, "say no more about it, but go and try. I will be king." So the man went away, quite sorrowful to think that his wife should want to be king. The sea looked dark grey colour, and was covered with foam as he cried out, "O man of the sea, come listen to me, for Alice my wife, the plague of my life, hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." "Well, what does she want now?" said the fish. "Alas," said the man, "my wife wants to be king." "Go home," said the fish. "She is king already." Then the fisherman went home, and as he came close to the palace, he saw a troop of soldiers, and heard the sound of drums and trumpets. And when he entered in, he saw his wife sitting on a high throne of gold and diamonds, with a golden crown upon her head. And on each side of her stood 6 beautiful maidens, each a head taller than the other. "Well, wife," said the fisherman, "are you king?" "Yes," said she, "I am king." And when he had looked at her for a long time, he said, "Ah, wife, what a fine thing it is to be king. Now we shall never have anything more to wish for." "I don't know about that," said she. "Never is a long time. I am king, 'tis true, but I begin to be tired of it, and I think I should like to be emperor." "Alas, wife, why should you wish to be emperor?" said the fisherman. "Husband," said she, "go to the fish. I say I will be emperor." "Ah, wife," replied the fisherman, "the fish cannot make you an emperor, and I should not like to ask him for such a thing." "I am king," said Alice, "and you are my slave. So go directly." So the fisherman was obliged to go, and he muttered as he went along, "This will come to no good. It is too much to ask. The fish will be tired at last, and then we shall repent of what we have done." He soon arrived at the sea, and the water was quite black and muddy, and a mighty whirlwind blew over it. But he went out to the shore and said, "O man of the sea, come listen to me, for Alice, my wife, the plague of my life, hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." "What would she have now?" said the fish. "Ah," said the fisherman, "she wants to be emperor." "Go home," said the fish. "She is emperor already." So he went home again, and as he came near, he saw his wife sitting on a very lofty throne made of solid gold, with a great crown on her head, full 2 yards high, and on each side of her stood her guards and attendants in a row, each one smaller than the other, from the tallest giant down to a little dwarf no bigger than my finger. And before her stood princes and dukes and carls, and the fisherman went up to her and said, "Wife, are you emperor?" "Yes," said she, "I am emperor." "Ah," said the man, as he gazed upon her, "what a fine thing it is to be emperor." "Husband," said she, "why should we stay at being emperor? I will be pope next." "Oh, wife, wife," said he, "how can you be pope? There is but one pope at a time in Christendom." "Husband," said she, "I will be pope this very day." "But," replied the husband, "the fish cannot make you pope." "What nonsense," said she. "If he can make me an emperor, he can make me a pope. Go and try him." So the fisherman went. But when he came to the shore, the wind was raging, and the sea was tossed up and down like boiling water, and the ships were in the greatest distress, and danced upon the waves most fearfully. In the middle of the sky there was a little blue, but towards south it was all red, as if a dreadful storm was rising. At this, the fisherman was terribly frightened and trembled, so that his knees knocked together. But he went to the shore and said, "O man of the sea, come listen to me, for Alice, my wife, the plague of my life, hath set me to beg a boon of thee." "What does she want now?" said the fish. "Ah," said the fisherman, "my wife wants to be pope." "Go home," said the fish. "She's pope already." Then the fisherman went home and found his wife sitting on a throne that was 2 miles high, and she had 3 great crowns on her head, and around stood all the pomp and power of the church, and on each side were 2 rows of burning lights of all sizes, the greatest as large as the highest and biggest tower in the world, and the least no larger than a small rushlight. "Wife," said the fisherman, as he looked at all this grandeur, "are you pope?" "Yes," said she, "I am pope." "Well, wife," replied he, "it is a grand thing to be pope, and now you must be content, for you can be nothing greater." "I will consider of that," said the wife. Then they went to bed. But Dame Alice could not sleep at night for thinking that what she would be next. At last morning came, and the sun rose. Ha! thought she, as she looked out at it through the window. Cannot I prevent the sun rising? At this she was very angry, and she awakened her husband and said, Husband, go to the fish and tell him I want to be lord of the sun and moon. The fisherman was half asleep, but the thought frightened him so much that he started to fall out of bed. Alas, wife, said he, cannot you be content to be pope? No, said she, I am very uneasy and cannot bear to see the sun and moon rise without my leave. Go to the fish directly. Then the man went trembling for fear, and as he was going down to the shore, a dreadful storm arose, so that the trees and the rocks shook, and the heavens became black, and the lightning played, and the thunder rolled, and you might have seen in the sea great black waves like mountains with a white crown of foam upon them. And the fisherman said, O man of the sea, come listen to me, for Alice, my wife, the plague of my life, hath sent me to beg a boon of thee. What does she want now? Said the fish. Ah, said he, she wants to be lord of the sun and moon. Go home, said the fish, to your ditch again. And there they live to this very day. I like that one. The second story of this evening is called The Tom Tit and the Bear. Wow, I have no idea what this one is about. Okay. The Tom Tit and the Bear. One summer day, as the wolf and the bear were walking together in a wood, they heard a bird singing most delightfully. Brother, said the bear, what can that bird be that is singing so sweetly? Oh, said the wolf, that is His Majesty, the King of the Birds. We must take care to show him all possible respect. Now I should tell you that this bird was after all none other than the Tom Tit. If that is the case, said the bear, I should like to see the royal palace. So pray come along and show it to me. Gently, my friend, said the wolf. We cannot see it just yet. We must wait until the queen comes home. Soon afterwards, the queen came with food in her beak and she and the king began to feed their young ones. Now for it, said the bear, and was about to follow them to see what was to be seen. Stop a little, Master Bruin, said the wolf. We must wait now till their majesties are gone again. So they marked the hole where they had seen the nest and went away. But the bear, being very eager to see the royal palace, soon came back again, and peeping into the nest, saw 5 or 6 young birds lying at the bottom of it. What nonsense, said Bruin. This is not a royal palace. I never saw such a filthy place in my life. And you are no royal children. You are little base-born brats. As soon as the young tomtits heard this, they were very angry and screamed out, We are not base-born, you stupid bear. Our father and mother are honest, good sort of people, and depend upon it, you shall suffer for your insolence. At this, the wolf and the bear grew frightened and ran away to their dens. But the young tomtits kept crying and screaming, and when their father and mother came home and offered them food, they all said, We will not touch a bit, no, not the leg of a fly, though we should die of hunger, till that rascal Bruin has been punished for calling us base-born brats. Make yourselves easy, my darlings, said the old king. You may be sure he shall meet with his deserts. So he went out and stood before the bear's den and cried out with a loud voice, Bruin the bear, thou hast shamefully insulted our lawful children. We therefore hereby declare bloody and cruel war against thee and thine, which shall never cease until thou hast been punished as thou shalt richly deservest. Ooh, that was hard. Now when the bear heard this, he called together the ox, the ass, the stag, and all the beasts of the earth, in order to consult about the means of his defense. And the tomtit also enlisted on his side all the birds of the air, both great and small, and a very large army of hornets, gnats, bees, and flies, and other insects. As the time approached when the war was to begin, the tomtit sent out spies to see who was the commander-in-chief of the enemy's forces. And the gnat, who was by far the cleverest spy of them all, flew backwards and forwards in the wood where the enemy's troops were, and at last hid himself under a leaf on a tree, close by which the orders of the day were given out. And the bear, who was standing so near the tree that the gnat could hear all he said, called to the fox and said, "Renard, you are the cleverest of all the beasts. Therefore you shall be our general and lead us to battle. But we must first agree upon some signal by which we may know what you want us to do." "Behold," said the fox, "I have a fine, long, bushy tail, which is very like a plume of red feathers, and gives me a very warlike air. Now remember, when you see me raise up my tail, you may be sure that the battle is won, and you have then nothing to do but to rush down upon the enemy with all your force. On the other hand, if I drop my tail, the day is lost, and you must run away as fast as you can." Now when the gnat had heard of this, she flew back to the tomtit and told him everything that had passed. At length the day came when the battle was to be fought, and as soon as it was light, behold, the army of beasts came rushing forward with such a fearful sound that the earth shook. And His Majesty, the tomtit, with his troops, came flying along in warlike array, flapping and fluttering and beating the air, so that it was quite frightful to hear. And both armies set themselves in order of battle upon the field. Now, the tomtit gave orders to a troop of hornets that at the first onset they should march straight towards Captain Renard, and fixing themselves about his tail, should sting him with all their might and main. The hornets did as they were told, and when Renard felt the first sting, he startled aside and shook one of his legs, but still held up his tail with wonderful bravery. At the second sting, he was forced to drop his tail for a moment, but when the third sting had fixed itself, he could bear it no longer, but clapped his tail between his legs and scampered away as fast as he could. As soon as the beasts saw this, they thought, of course, all was lost, and scoured across the country in the greatest dismay, leaving the birds the masters of the field. And now the king and queen flew back in triumph to their children and said, "Now, children, eat, drink, and be merry, for the victory is ours." But the young bird said, "No, not till Bruin has humbly begged our pardon for calling us base-born." So the king flew back to the bear's den and cried out, "Thou villain bear, come forthwith to my abode and humbly beseech my children to forgive thee the insult thou hast offered them. For if thou wilt not do this, every bone in thy wretched body shall be broken to pieces." So the bear was forced to crawl out of his den very sulkily and do what the king bade him. And after that, the young birds sat down together and ate and drank and made merry till midnight. The end. Okay. The next story I have read, and it's quite delightful. The next story is called The 12 Dancing Princesses. Princesses, that's difficult. The 12 Dancing Princesses. There was a king who had 12 beautiful daughters. They slept in 12 beds, all in one room. And when they went to bed, the doors were shut and locked up. But every morning their shoes were found to be quite worn through, as if they had been dancing all night. And yet nobody could find out how it happened or where they had been. Then the king made it known to all the land that if any person could discover the secret and find out where it was that the princesses danced in the night, he should have the one he liked best for his wife, and should be king after his death. But whoever tried and did not succeed, after 3 days and nights, should be put to death. Ooh, exciting. A king's son soon came. He was well entertained, and in the evening was taken to the chamber next to the one where the princesses lay in their 12 beds. There he was to sit and watch where they went to dance, and in order that nothing might pass without his hearing it, the door of his chamber was left open. But the king's son soon fell asleep, and when he awoke in the morning, he found that the princesses had all been dancing, for the soles of their shoes were full of holes. The same thing happened the second and third night. So the king ordered his head to be cut off. After him came several others, but they all had the same luck, and all lost their lives in the same manner. Now it chanced that an old soldier who had been wounded in battle and could fight no longer passed through the country where this king reigned. And as he was travelling through a wood, he met an old woman who asked him where he was going. "I hardly know where I am going, or what I had better do," said the soldier, "but I think I should like very well to find out where it is that the princesses dance, and then in time I might be king." "Well," said the old dame, "that is not a very hard task. Only take care not to drink any of the wine which one of the princesses will bring to you in the evening. And as soon as she leaves, you pretend to be fast asleep." Then she gave him a cloak and said, "As soon as you put that on, you will become invisible, and you will then be able to follow the princesses wherever they go." When the soldier heard all this good counsel, he was determined to try his luck. So he went to the king and said he was willing to undertake the task. He was as well received as the others had been, and the king ordered fine royal robes to be given him. And when the evening came, he was led to the outer chamber. Just as he was going to lie down, the eldest of the princesses brought him a cup of wine. But the soldier threw it away secretly, taking care not to drink a drop. Then he laid himself down on his bed, and in a little while began to snore very loud, as if he were fast asleep. When the 12 princesses heard this, they laughed heartily, and the eldest said, "This fellow too might have done a wiser thing than lose his life in this way." Then they rose up and opened their drawers and boxes, and took out all of their finest clothes, and dressed themselves at the glass, and skipped about as if they were eager to begin dancing. But the youngest said, "I don't know how it is. While you are so happy, I feel very uneasy. I am sure some mischance will befall us." "You simpleton," said the eldest, "you are always afraid. You have forgotten how many kings' sons have already watched us in vain. And as for this soldier, even if I had not given him his sleeping draught, he would have slept soundly enough." When they were all ready, they went and looked at the soldier, but he snored on and did not stir hand or foot, so they thought that they were quite safe. And the eldest went up to her own bed and clapped her hands, and the bed sunk into the floor, and a trap door flew open. The soldier saw them going down through the trapdoor, one after the other, the eldest leading the way. And thinking he had no time to lose, he jumped up, put on the cloak which the old woman had given him, and followed them. But in the middle of the stairs he trod on the gown of the youngest princess, and she cried out to her sisters, "All is not right. Someone took hold of my gown." "You silly creature," said the eldest, "it is nothing but a nail in the wall." Then down they all went, and at the bottom they found themselves in a most delightful grove of trees, and the leaves were all of silver and glittered and sparkled beautifully. The soldier wished to take away some token of the place, so he broke off a little branch, and there came a loud noise from the tree. Then the youngest daughter said again, "I am sure all is not right. Did not you hear that noise? That never happened before." But the eldest said, "It is only our princes who are shouting for joy at our approach." Then they came to another grove of trees, where all the leaves were of gold, and afterwards to a third, where the leaves were all glittering diamonds. And the soldier broke a branch from each, and each time there was a loud noise, which made the younger sister tremble with fear. But the eldest still said it was only the princes who were crying for joy. So they went on till they came to a great lake, and at the side of the lake there lay 12 little boats with 12 handsome princes in them, who seemed to be waiting there for the princesses. One of the princesses went into each boat, and the soldier stepped into the same boat with the youngest. As they were rowing over the lake, the prince who was in the boat with the youngest princess and the soldier said, "I do not know why it is, and though I am rowing with all my might, we do not get on so fast as usual, and I am quite tired. The boat seems very heavy today." "It is only the heat of the weather," said the princess. "I feel it very warm too." On the other side of the lake stood a fine illuminated castle, from which came the merry music of horns and trumpets. There they all landed and went into the castle, and each prince danced with his princess, and the soldier, who was all the time invisible, danced with them too. And when any of the princesses had a cup of wine set by her, he drank it all up, so that when she put the cup to her mouth, it was empty. At this too, the younger sister was terribly frightened, but the eldest always silenced her. They danced on till 3 o'clock in the morning, and then all their shoes were worn out, so that they were obliged to leave off. The princes rowed them back again over the lake, but this time the soldier placed himself in the boat with the eldest princess. And on the opposite shore they took leave of each other, the princesses promising to come back again the next night. When they came to the stairs, the soldier ran on before the princesses, and laid himself down. And as the 12 sisters slowly came up, very much tired, they heard him snoring in bed. So they said, "Now all is quite safe." Then they undressed themselves and put away their fine clothes, pulled off their shoes, and went to bed. In the morning, the soldier said nothing about what had happened, but determined to see more of this strange adventure, and went again the second and third night. And everything happened just as before. The princesses danced each time till their shoes were worn to pieces, and then returned home. However, on the third night, the soldier carried away one of the golden cups as a token of where he had been. As soon as the time came when he was to declare the secret, he was taken before the king with the 3 branches and the golden cup. And the 12 princesses stood listening behind the door to hear what he would say. And when the king asked him, "Where do my 12 daughters dance at night?" he answered, "With 12 princes in a castle underground." And then he told the king all that had happened, and showed him the 3 branches and the golden cup which he had brought with him. Then the king called for the princesses and asked them whether what the soldier said was true. And when they saw that they were discovered, and that it was no use to deny what had happened, they confessed it all. And the king asked the soldier which of them he would choose for his wife. And he answered, "I am not very young, so I will have the eldest." And they were married that very day, and the soldier was chosen to be the king's heir. The end. I am going to do at least one more. I don't know if I'll do more than one more. I'm enjoying it. Just having a bit of energy level problem. Okay, I'll definitely do one more. I'll see if I push on for another one after that. I don't know if I know this one either. Oh yes, this, my friends, is a classic. You may not know it by its name, but I'm sure you know it by its tale. The next story is called Rosebud. Once upon a time, there lived a king and queen who had no children, and this they lamented very much. But one day, as the queen was walking by the side of the river, a little fish lifted its head out of the water and said, "Your wish shall be fulfilled, and you shall soon have a daughter." What the little fish had foretold soon came to pass, and the queen had a little girl that was so very beautiful that the king could not cease looking at it for joy, and determined to hold a great feast. So he invited not only his relations, friends, and neighbors, but also all the fairies, that they might be kind and good to his little daughter. Now there were 13 fairies in his kingdom, and he had only 12 golden dishes for them to eat out of, so that he was obliged to leave one of the fairies without an invitation. The rest came, and after the feast was over, they gave all their best gifts to the little princess. One gave her virtue, another beauty, another riches, and so on, till she had all that was excellent in the world. When 11 had done blessings to her, the 13th, who had not been invited, and was very angry on that account, came in, and determined to take her revenge, she cried out, "The king's daughter shall, on her 15th year, be wounded by a spindle and fall down dead." Then the 12th, who had not yet given her gift, came forward and said that the bad wish must be fulfilled, but that she could soften it, and that the king's daughter shall not die, but fall asleep for 100 years. That the king hoped to save his dear child from the threatened evil, and ordered that all the spindles in the kingdom should be bought up and destroyed. All the fairies' gifts were in the meantime fulfilled, for the princess was so beautiful and well behaved and amiable and wise that everyone who knew her, loved her. Now it happened that on the very day she was 15 years old, the king and queen were not at home, and she was left alone in the palace. So she roved about by herself and looked at all the rooms and chambers, till at last she came to an old tower, to which there was a narrow staircase leading with a little door. In the door there was a golden key, and when she turned it, the door sprang open, and there sat an old lady spinning very busily. "Why, how now, good mother?" said the princess. "What are you doing there?" "Spinning," said the old lady, and nodded her head. "How prettily that little thing turns round," said the princess, and took her spindle and began to spin. But scarcely had she touched it when the prophecy was fulfilled, and she fell down lifeless to the ground. However, she was not dead, but had only fallen into a deep sleep, and the king and the queen, who just then came home, and all their court fell asleep too, and the horses slept in the stables, and the dogs in the court, the pigeons on the housetop, and the flies on the walls. Even the fire on the hearth left off blazing and went to sleep, and the meat that was roasting stood still, and the cook, who was at that moment pulling the kitchen boy by the hair to give him a box on the ear for something he had done amiss, let him go, and both fell asleep, and so everything stood still and slept soundly. A large hedge of thorns soon grew round the palace, and every year it became higher and thicker, till at last the whole palace was surrounded and hid, so that not even the roof or the chimneys could be seen. But there went a report through all the land of the beautiful sleeping Rosebud, for so was the king's daughter called. So that from time to time several kings' sons came and tried to break through the thicket into the palace. This they could never do, for the thorns and bushes laid hold of them as if it were with laid hold of them as it were with hands, and there they stuck fast and died miserably. After many years there came a king's son into that land, and an old man told the story of the thicket of thorns and how a beautiful palace stood behind it, in which was a wondrous princess called Rosebud, asleep with all her court. He told too how he had heard from his grandfather that many, many princes had come and had tried to break through the thicket, but had stuck fast and died. Then the young prince said, "All this shall not frighten me. I will go and see Rosebud." The old man tried to dissuade him, but he persisted in going. Now that very day was the 100 years completed, and as the prince came to the thicket, he saw nothing but beautiful flowering shrubs, through which he passed with ease, and they closed after him as firm as ever. Then he came at last to the palace, and there in the court lay the dogs asleep, and the horses in the stables, and on the roof sat the pigeons fast asleep with their heads under their wings. And when he came into the palace, the flies slept on the walls, and the cook in the kitchen was still holding up her hand, as if she was to beat the boy. And the maid sat with a black fowl in her hand, ready to be plucked. Then he went on still farther, and all was so still that he could hear every breath he drew, till at last he came to the old tower and opened the door of the little room in which Rosebud was. And there she lay fast asleep, and looked so beautiful that he could not take his eyes off, and he stooped down and gave her a kiss. But the moment he kissed her, she opened her eyes and awoke, and smiled upon him. Then they went out together, and presently the king and queen also awoke, and all the court, and they gazed on each other with great wonder. And the horses got up and shook themselves, and the dogs jumped about and barked. The pigeons took their heads from under their wings and looked about and flew into the fields. The flies on the walls buzzed away, the fire in the kitchen blazed up and cooked the dinner, and the roast meat turned round again. The cook gave the boy the box on his ear so that he cried out, and the maid went on plucking the fowl. And then was the wedding of the prince and Rosebud celebrated, and they lived happily ever after, their lives long. The end. um, I really like this next one. I'm saying this like I know every single one, which I don't, but okay. I'm going to have a try at doing this one. It's very energetic, and there's a lot of different characters. So I might bugger it up, but too bad, right? Let's give it a try. This next story is called Tom Thumb. There was once a poor woodman sitting by the fire in his cottage, and his wife sat by his side spinning. "How lonely it is," said he, "for you and me to sit here by ourselves without any children to play about and amuse us, while other people seem so happy and merry with their children." "What you say is very true," said the wife, sighing and turning round her wheel. How happy should I be if I had but one child, and if it were even so ever so small, nay, if it were no bigger than my thumb, I should be very happy and love it dearly. Now it came to pass that this good woman's wish was fulfilled, just as she desired. For some time afterwards she had a little boy, who was quite healthy and strong, but not much bigger than my thumb. So they said, well, we cannot say we did not get what we wished for, and little as he is, we love him dearly. And they called him Tom Thumb. They gave him plenty of food, yet he never grew bigger, but remained just the same size as when he was born. Still, his eyes were sharp and sparkling, and he soon showed himself to be a clever little fellow who always knew well what he was about. One day, as the woodman was getting ready to go into the wood to cut fuel, he said, I wish I had someone to bring the cart after me, for I want to make haste. Oh, father, cried Tom, I will take care of that. The cart shall be in the wood by the time you want it. Then the woodman laughed and said, how can that be? You cannot reach to the horse's bridle. Never mind that, father, said Tom. If my mother would only harness the horse, I will get into the ear and tell him which way to go. Well, said the father, we will try for once. When the time came, the mother harnessed the horse to the cart and put Tom into his ear. And as he sat here, the little man told the beast how to go, crying out, go on, and stop, as he wanted. So the horse went on just as if the woodman had driven it himself into the wood. It happened that as the horse was going a little too fast, and Tom was calling out, gently, gently, two strangers came up. What an odd thing this is, an odd thing this is, said one. There is a cart going along, and I hear a carter talking to the horse, but can see no one. That is strange, said the other. Let us follow the cart and see where it goes. So they went on into the wood, till at last they came to the place where the woodman was. Then Tom Thumb, seeing his father, cried out, see, father, here I am, with the cart, all right and safe. Now take me down. So the father took hold of the horse with one hand, and with the other took his son out of the ear. Then he put him down upon the straw, where he sat as merry as you please. The two strangers were all the time looking on, and did not know what to say for wonder. At last one took the other aside and said, that little urchin will make our fortune if we can get him and carry him about from town to town as a show. We must buy him. So they went to the woodman and asked him what he would take for the little man. He will be better off, said they, with us than with you. I won't sell him at all, said the father. My own flesh and blood is dearer to me than all the silver and gold in the world. But Tom, hearing the bargain they wanted to make, crept up to his father's coat to his shoulder and whispered in his ear, take the money, father, and let them have me. I'll soon come back to you. So the woodman at last agreed to sell Tom to the strangers for a large piece of gold. Where'd you like to sit? Said one of them. Oh, put me on the rim of your hat. That will be a nice gallery for me. I can walk about there and see the country as we go along. So they did as he wished, and when Tom had taken leave of his father, they took him away with him. They journeyed on till it began to be dusky, and then the little man said, let me get down, I'm tired. So the man took off his hat and set him down on a clod of earth, as in a ploughed field by the side of the road. But Tom ran amongst the furrows and at last slipped off into an old mouse hole. Good night, masters, said he, I'm off. Mind and look sharp after me the next time. They ran directly to the place and poked the ends of their sticks into the mouse hole, but all in vain. Tom only crawled farther and farther in, and at last it became quite dark, so that they were obliged to go their way without their prize, as sulkily as you please. When Tom found they were gone, he came out of his hiding place. "What dangerous walking it is," said he. "In this ploughed field, if I were to fall from one of these great clods, I shall certainly break my neck." At last, by good luck, he found a large empty snail shell. "This is lucky," said he. "I can sleep here very well." And in he crept. Just as he was falling asleep, he heard two men passing, and one said to the other, "How shall we manage to steal that rich parson's silver and gold?" "I'll tell you," cried Tim. "What noise was that?" said the thief, frightened. "I'm sure I heard someone speak." They stood still listening, and Tom said, "Take me with you. I'll soon show you how to get the parson's money." "But where are you?" they said. "Look about on the ground," answered he, "and listen, and see, and listen where the sound comes from." At last the thieves found him out and lifted him up with their hands. "You little urchin," they said, "what can you do for us?" "Why, I can get behind the iron bars of the parson's house and throw you out whatever you want." "That's a good thought," said the thieves. "Come along, we shall see what you can do." When they came to the parson's house, Tom slipped through the window bars into the room, and then called out as loud as he could bawl, "Will you have all that is here?" At this, the thieves were frightened and said softly, and said, "Softly, softly, speak low, that you may not awaken anybody." But Tom pretended not to understand them and bawled out again, "How much will you have? Shall I throw it all out?" Now the cook lay in the next room, and hearing a noise, she raised herself in her bed and listened. Meantime, the thieves were frightened and ran off to a little distance. But at last they plucked up courage and said, "You little urchin is only trying to make fools of us." So they came back and whispered softly to him, saying, "Now let us have no more of your jokes, but throw out some of the money." Then Tom called out as loud as he could, "Very well, hold your hands, here it comes." The cook heard this quite plain, so she sprang out of bed and ran to the open door. The thieves ran off as if a wolf was at their tails, and the maid, having groped about and found nothing, went away for a light. By the time she returned, Tom had slipped off into the barn, and when the cook had looked about and searched every hole and corner and found nobody, she went to bed, thinking she must have dreamed with her eyes open. The little man crawled about in the hay loft, and at last found a glorious place to finish his night's rest in. So he laid himself down, meaning to sleep till daylight, and then find his way home to his father and mother. But alas, how cruelly was he disappointed, when crosses and sorrows happen in this world. The cook got up early, before daybreak, to feed the cows. She went straight to the hayloft and carried away a large bundle of hay, with the little man in the middle of it, fast asleep. He still, however, slept on, and did not awake till he found himself in the mouth of a cow, who had taken him up in a mouthful of hay. "Good lack-a-day," said he, "how did I manage to tumble into this mill?" But he soon found out where he really was, and was obliged to have all his wits about him in order that he might not get between the cow's teeth, and so be crushed to death. At last, down he went into her stomach. "It's rather dark here," said he. They forgot to build windows in this room to let the sun in. A candle would not be a bad thing." Though he made the best of his bad luck, he did not like his quarters at all, and the worst of it was that more and more hay was coming down, and the space of which he was became smaller and smaller. At last he cried out as loud as he could, "Don't bring me any more hay! Don't bring me any more hay!" The maid happened to be just there when milking the cow, and hearing someone speak and seeing nobody, and yet being quite sure it was the same voice that she had heard in the night, She was so frightened that she fell off her stool and overset the milk pail. She ran off as fast as she could to her master, the parson, and said, "Sir, sir, the cow is talking." But the parson said, "Woman, thou art surely mad." However, he went with her into the cow house to see what was the matter. Scarcely had they set their foot on the threshold when Tom called out, "Don't bring me any more hay." Then the parson himself was frightened, and thinking the cow was surely bewitched, ordered that she should be killed directly. So the cow was killed, and the stomach to which Tom lay was thrown out upon a dunghill. Tom soon set himself to work to get out, which was not a very easy task. But at last, just as he had made room to get his head out, a new misfortune befell him. A hungry wolf sprang out and swallowed the whole stomach with Tom in it at a single gulp and ran away. Tom, however, was not disheartened, and thinking the wolf would not dislike having some chat with him as he was going along, he called out, "My good friend, I can show you a famous treat." "What's that?" said the wolf. "In such a house," said Tom, describing his father's house. "You can crawl through the drain into the kitchen, and there you'll find cakes, ham, beef, and everything your heart can desire." The wolf did not want to be asked twice, so that very night he went to the house and crawled through the drain into the kitchen and ate and drank there to his heart's content. As soon as he was satisfied, he wanted to get away, but he had eaten so much that he could not get out the same way that he had come in. This was just what Tom had reckoned upon, and he now began to set up a great shout, making all the noise he could. "Will you be quiet?" said the wolf. "You'll awaken everybody in the house." "What's that to me?" said the little man. "You have had your frolic, now I have a mind to be merry myself." And he began again, singing and shouting as loud as he could. The woodman and his wife being awakened by the noise, peeped through a crack in the door. But when they saw that the wolf was there, they may well suppose that they were terribly frightened, and the woodman ran for his axe and gave his wife a scythe. Now do you stay behind, said the woodman, and when I have knocked him on the head, you can rip up his belly for him with a scythe. Tom heard all of this and said, Father, Father, I'm here. The wolf has swallowed me. And his father said, Heaven be praised. We have found our dear child again. And he told his wife not to use the scythe for fear that she would hurt him. Then he aimed a great blow and struck the wolf on the head and killed him on the spot. And when he was dead, they cut open his body and set Tommy free. Ah, said the father, what fears we have had for you. Yes, father, answered he. I have travelled all over the world since we parted, and in one way or another, and now I am glad to be here with fresh air again. Why, where have you been? Said his father. I've been in a mouse hole, in a snail shell, down a cow's throat, and in a wolf's belly, and yet here I am, safe and sound. Well, said they, we will not sell you again for all the riches in the world. So they hugged and kissed their dear little son and gave him plenty to eat and drink and fetched him new clothes, for his old ones were quite spoiled on his journey. The end. Wow, 59 minutes and 27 seconds. Thank you all for listening. I bid you good evening.